What's the biggest mistake you've made in the heat of the moment?
Story 1. My boyfriend's sister had a phase where she was meeting guys off Craigslist. Yeah, the same site people use to sell moldy couches and old lawnmowers. Naturally, I found that pretty funny.
Well, one of the guys she met ended up sleeping with her and then waited until she was asleep to steal her car. Seriously, gone. I thought for sure that experience would be enough to make her quit online meetups. But nope. A couple of months later, she met another guy, and this one made off with her PlayStation. At that point, I started to think maybe the real Craigslist was the friends she made along the way. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. In 1996, my girlfriend and I were both 21 years old and didn't live together. I lived with my grandparents, and she lived with her strict Catholic parents. Having any alone time at her house was impossible and not exactly easy at mine either. We were both dangerously distracted by hormones, so I came up with a plan. At the time, I had a job delivering wheelchairs, hospital beds, medicine, stuff like that. I drove a box van and was allowed to take it home every night, and over the weekends I had off. So one evening, I had my younger brother help me disassemble my futon and pass it out through our bedroom window. I set it up in the back of the box van, threw in a CD player, some incense, candles, and whatever else I could think of to make it feel, well, not like the back of a box van. Around 8 p.m., I drove over to pick up my girlfriend. We told her parents we were just running to the grocery store and would be back soon. Instead, I drove us out to some fig orchards. I thought it would be private enough, and I tried to get deep into the orchard so no one would see the van from the road. As I started driving down one of the rows between the fig trees, it began to get muddy. I had zero experience driving in mud, so I figured the solution was to just gun it and keep going.
Yeah, that didn't work.
It got worse and worse until we finally veered off between two trees about 70 feet off the road and got completely stuck. I climbed out, shin deep in mud. She got out to help and we both ended up muddy as hell. There was no getting the van out on our own. We hiked out of the orchard into the nearest neighborhood. This was pre-cell phone days, so we started knocking on doors, asking to use a landline. No one wanted to answer, probably assuming we were planning a home invasion or something. After a good amount of walking and knocking, we finally found a group of teenagers outside their parents' house who let us use their phone. I called a tow truck, and it took forever to arrive. When the driver finally showed up, he told me he'd have to anchor the van to the fig trees. If any trees broke, I'd be on the hook for thousands in damages. Thankfully, no trees broke. He got the van out by around 11 p.m. It cost me $440, which I didn't have on me. I had to call my uncle and borrow the money until I got paid. The whole thing was a complete disaster. I got her home close to midnight, and we had exactly zero intimate time that day. She never even saw the futon or had any idea what I'd set up until I explained my failed plan on the drive back. That girl stuck it out with me. Bad ideas and all, we ended up married for 14 years and had kids together. Our children are 23 now. We divorced in 2013, but she's still like my best friend, so I guess it's a happy ending in a way. What a classy guy, right? I mean, who tries to set the mood in the back of a box van? Hormones make you do some dumb things. That actually sounds like a pretty cool idea. I don't know why you think it sounds so bad. Sure, it wasn't the most luxurious setup, but you went out of your way to make it special and private, which is way better than just sneaking around. Story 3. In the early days of the internet, around the year 2000, I would often spend weekends at a buddy's house. I had been madly in love with Britney Spears since her rise to fame. My friend's stepdad worked for the local telecom company, which meant they had access to the fastest high-speed internet available at the time. Late at night, after my friend had fallen asleep, I'd sneak into his family's den and browse their desktop computer, searching for videos I definitely wasn't supposed to be looking for, with reckless disregard and zero understanding of malicious links, spam, or the shady corners of the early web. One night, after nearly freezing their computer with an endless stream of pop-ups, I saw an ad promising access to a scandalous video supposedly involving Britney Spears. I had to see it right then. I went down the rabbit hole, click after click, page after page, only to find that it required a credit card to access. The next day, after hard resetting their PC several times and trying to erase any trace of what I'd done, I came up with a terrible idea. I'd use my older sister's credit card. Surely, I thought, she'd never notice a $0.99 charge, and I'd finally unlock whatever treasure I thought I was chasing. Clueless about the risks, that's exactly what I did. The next weekend, in the early morning hours, I found the same link again. I entered her information. Immediately, her card started getting hit with unauthorized charges from around the world. Meanwhile, I was hit with an avalanche of pop-ups and fake redirects. I spent hours chasing that elusive video. As the sun came up, I gave up and hard reset the computer again. By lunchtime, my sister's bank had called our house about the suspicious activity. They gave her the phone number I'd entered. She and my mom figured it out quickly. I confessed as soon as I was confronted. That evening, my mom even tried to convince my sister to press charges. By Monday morning, she drove me to the local police station and dropped me off. I had to walk in and admit everything. Alone, there wasn't much the police could do beyond filling out paperwork. The credit card company canceled the charges and issued my sister a new card. But the whole ordeal was a major headache. Our relationship has been strained ever since. Even now, 20-plus years later, she keeps her purse and wallet tucked away when she visits for the holidays. That incident also landed me in a few months of sessions with a youth pastor my aunt recommended. I had to talk to a complete stranger about my thoughts and feelings, all under the umbrella of a faith I didn't believe in. The experience stuck with me, and not in a good way. I'm almost 38 now, twice married, with 3 kids. My oldest is nearly the age I was when I made that massively stupid mistake. And in some ways, I'm still dealing with the fallout. And no, I still never saw that video. God bless you, Britney. Story 4. This might be my most embarrassing moment ever. It was a slow day at work. I was alone in the office, just doing a quick scroll through social media on my work computer. I came across a news article about an internet personality who injured her back at a live event. I clicked in, curious, and saw a comment referencing one of her well-known scenes. I didn't recognize the name mentioned, so out of curiosity, I Googled her. I clicked a video, gave it a quick glance, and realized it wasn't really my thing. I was just about to close the tab when my mouse moved on its own. My heart stopped. That wasn't a glitch. Someone else was controlling my screen. Yep, the remote bookkeeper we work with had just logged into my computer through remote access at the exact worst second. Even worse, I thought I had disabled remote login for that machine. She had apparently been trying to connect for over an hour, and something must have woken the remote session. I even ignored her earlier call, assuming it was spam. Now I had a choice: own up to it or pretend nothing happened. Naturally, I panicked and went with pretend nothing happened. I called her. No answer. A few minutes later, she called me back. After exchanging hellos, she hit me with the line that still haunts me. Are you finished with whatever you were doing? Story 5. I kissed a coworker. She was married, and her husband was also a coworker. They were the drama couple, always fighting, always making up, and sometimes the drama spilled into work until a manager had to step in. The husband was a huge jerk, but also kind of important because he was good at his job. They were probably 10 years older than me. I was in my early 20s, had recently gotten in shape, and was starting to find my confidence. Back then, I was naturally flirtatious, and she was definitely down for it. We flirted constantly via a messenger app at work. She'd make copies in the room right outside my office, basically doing her best to get my attention. I knew it was a bad idea, but I was young and dumb, and an attractive, experienced woman was giving me attention, something I didn't get a lot of in high school, at least not that overtly. So I let things slide a little further and a little further. Being young and single, I usually stayed late at work. One night, after everyone else had left for the weekend, she happened to be working late too. After we checked that the offices were empty, we kissed. She wanted to leave and find somewhere we could have alone time. I hesitated. I already knew this was bad enough, and crossing that line would mean there was no going back.
I wasn't dating anyone, but being a willing participant in someone else's cheating didn't sit right with me, so I stopped it there. Over the next few weeks, I tried to keep my distance. I was still very attracted to her, and every once in a while, I'd slip maybe a flirtatious look or a comment, but we never kissed again or ended up alone together. About a month later, her husband invited a bunch of coworkers to a party at their house, including me. I was naive and thought it'd be fine. I brought food and beer, just planning to hang out and have fun. She gave a group of us a house tour, and right in the closet, front and center, was lingerie on display. She gave me a look and a smile, and I got the message. I should have left right then, but I figured I could just steer clear of her for the rest of the night. Later, the more her husband drank, the more of an ezurk he became. I didn't realize at the time that coworkers were leaving or that trouble was brewing upstairs. Eventually, a good friend pulled me aside in the basement where we were playing beer pong and said they were arguing loud, drunk, and her husband said he wanted to kick my ass. He thinks you and his wife have a thing going on. I could honestly say I wasn't, but my friend said we should get me out of there just in case. I agreed. I didn't want to fight the guy in his own house, especially when that could spill over into work, and while I trained and could have easily taken him, he had other friends there. Driving away while chaos was erupting behind me felt humiliating, but I figured I deserved that for letting things go as far as they did. At work the following Monday, her husband made the rounds apologizing for the drama, including to me, and blamed it on being drunk and acting stupid. They were known for fighting when they drank, and I think that night was one of those moments where things boiled over. My name probably came up. Her face gave something away, and he pressed her buttons. She got defensive, and it all blew up. One time, when he and I were talking, he was oddly cryptic. He hinted that he and his wife had made a lot of mistakes in their marriage and said something like, "Everybody can move on." I got the sense he knew she'd cheated before. She had told me as much to reassure me that he'd never find out if we slept together. He seemed resigned, like an unwilling cuck. I honestly felt bad for him and for how much further things could have gone. I told him, if you think something's going on between me and her, there's not, and that was the truth. I had blocked her, partly because I didn't trust myself not to slip if she reached out again. After that, she acted like she didn't know me and made a big public show of how much she loved her husband. It was all performative, like a teenage couple, except they were 35. For a while after, I'd still have moments of weakness, thinking, man, I should have just gone for it. But honestly, I'm really glad I didn't. Sometimes I'm surprised I didn't. If there's a lesson in all this, don't just avoid sticking your pen in the company ink. Don't even get near it. The excitement isn't worth it. I barely avoided a workplace disaster. Story 6. In the early 2000s, I worked in customer service for a telephone company, and it was honestly impressive how many people would call in to challenge their bills. As in, yes, clearly the billing system must have randomly generated a number that just so happened to be a late-night quiz show airing at the exact time it was supposedly dialed. One particularly uncomfortable call came from a woman questioning some charges to 09 numbers, which is UK premium rate numbers. I explained that if she had kids, they might have been calling quiz lines, the X Factor, or whatever premium numbers they saw advertised on TV. She told me she didn't have kids, it was just her and her husband. I looked up the number using an 09 number checker and discovered it was for a gay chat line. I had no idea how to tell her, but she really wanted to know, so I gave her the website where she could look it up herself and quickly ended the call. I wanted no part in that drama. Story 7. Back in my 20s, I was staying in a backpacker's dorm with shared bathrooms, the kind with 10 beds, no privacy, and paper-thin walls. I had a bit of a thing going on with a guy who was also staying there. He liked me. I liked him. But finding a private spot? Not exactly easy. So, like many 20-somethings with more hormones than common sense, we decided to sneak into the shower together one night. It's worth noting here that we had just switched from a different floor to this one and knew no one, so there we were, us standing in the shower, water running, and we were getting busy. Suddenly, we heard a voice with a thick German accent yell from outside the door, "Dude, you're flooding the hallway." We quickly wrapped things up, literally, stepped out, and yep, water everywhere. The hallway was soaked, and apparently it had leaked through the floor into the rooms below. So we spent the next hour mopping the hallway, meeting our confused neighbors for the first time, and then making the very awkward trip to the front desk to report the incident. Nothing says bonding like shared embarrassment and a mop bucket. Said, Story 8. A while back, a friend asked me to dog sit at her parents' house while they were away. She set me up with a blow-up mattress in the living room, which was pretty comfy for a few days. The house was nice and quiet, and I was basically living the easy life, just hanging out with the dog. One evening, I started feeling a little bored. You know how it is when you're by yourself in a new place. Everything gets kind of dull after a while. So I decided to call my girlfriend to chat and catch up. Things started off normal enough, just talking about our days and whatnot, but then the conversation got a little flirty. I guess we were both missing each other. Without going into too many details, let's just say things got a bit steamy over the phone. I was sitting there on the blow-up mattress in the living room, feeling a little reckless and a lot excited. The next day, I got a text from my friend. She said, "Hey, just a heads up, there are cameras in the living room. They use them to keep an eye on the dog while they're away. If you want more privacy, you can turn them the other way." I froze. Cameras? In the living room? That was the room where I'd been, well, you can imagine. I quickly thought back to everything I'd done the night before. I'd definitely changed clothes in there, and I wasn't so sure I'd been as careful as I thought. Trying not to freak out, I turned the cameras away immediately and double-checked that they were definitely not pointing at me anymore. I spent the rest of the day feeling incredibly embarrassed. I mean, how often do you realize you might have been on camera without even knowing it? When my friend came back a few days later, I half expected her to bring it up and tease me endlessly, but she just laughed and said, "Don't worry, we didn't watch anything. The dog was the star of the show." Still, every time I look at that dog now, I wonder if he remembers my impromptu performance. All in all, it was a hilarious, mortifying experience and a good reminder to always check for cameras, especially when you're crashing at someone else's place. Story 9. About 10 years ago, I found myself in a situation that, in hindsight, was probably destined to go sideways. I was at a dance club, one of those places with flashing lights, loud music, and of course the promise of a good time. Well, things got a little wild, and I somehow ended up being offered a double dance by two dancers in the back room. They made all these enticing promises about what would happen, and in the heat of the moment, I did something incredibly stupid. I gave them my credit card. Yep, handed it over like a clueless fool. What followed was nothing like the fantasy they'd painted. No wild party, no extra perks, just me stuck with a massive credit card charge I didn't expect, and zero way to fight it. I spent weeks, maybe months, trying to dispute the charge, calling the bank, arguing with the club, and getting nowhere. It was a lesson in patience and futility. Looking back, I realize I wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed that night. But hey, everyone's got to have a story, right? Mine just happens to involve a very expensive dance that turned out to be more of a financial workout. Story 10. I met my first serious girlfriend in college. She was 2 years younger than me, still figuring out her path while I was wrapping up my third year. Even though I was about to move 500 kilometers south for school, we decided to stay together. I was completely head over heels, not just because I liked her, but let's be honest, because I was ridiculously attracted to her. Money was tight, but that didn't stop me. Every single weekend, without fail, I made the trip to see her. It wasn't easy. After my last class on Friday, I'd take a local bus to the nearest station where I'd wait for the long-distance coach for hours, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, just to get closer to her town. Once I got to a bigger city nearby, I'd hitchhike the last leg of the journey, hoping for a friendly driver willing to take me all the way. By the time I arrived, usually late Friday night or early Saturday morning, I was exhausted but ecstatic. We'd lock ourselves in her tiny dorm room and spend the entire weekend together, not wanting to waste a second. The moment the clock hit Sunday morning, it was like a race against time. I'd pack up, start the journey back, and head straight to my Monday classes, barely stopping to catch my breath. This exhausting routine went on for almost a year. Looking back, I'm amazed I had the energy or the patience. But those weekends made it all worth it.
It was a crazy, romantic, and sometimes downright ridiculous chapter of my life that taught me a lot about love, commitment, and how far you'll go for someone who means a lot to you. Story 11. When I was 18, my sister was getting married, and I was the best man for my now brother-in-law. We were finishing up getting ready at the church, and I was in one of the back rooms struggling to tie my tie. His younger stepsister, who was about my age and had been helping out all weekend, came in to grab something. We'd been a bit flirty throughout the weekend, and when I asked her if she knew how to tie a tie properly, she came over to help. I could feel she was into me, and she was giving me the look the whole time. She was helping tie the tie. Things kind of escalated quickly. We ended up latching the door and sharing a private moment right before the ceremony, and even later at the reception. It was definitely unexpected. Later on, her dad found out about it and wasn't too happy. Although he wasn't officially married to my brother-in-law's mom, they'd been together for a long time, so the family ties made things complicated. After that, things got pretty tense whenever our families hung out. Eventually, they decided to go their separate ways, and he moved with his daughter to Missouri. Looking back, it was a wild experience that definitely made that wedding weekend unforgettable. Story 12. It was the year 2000, and I was 18 when I finally got my own desktop computer, one of those big, bulky machines that ran on dial-up internet. I spent countless late nights chatting with random people on Yahoo Messenger, and that's where I met James. James was a year older, and from England. He was charming, funny, and had that classic British wit that made me hang on every word. Since I was pretty tomboyish and shy back then, I actually sent him a photo of one of my sister's friends to make a better impression. We ended up talking almost every day. Back then, voice chatting wasn't free or reliable, so we mostly talked on the phone. Since my family didn't have much money, James usually called me, and those calls were pretty expensive, but honestly, I didn't care. Just hearing his voice made my day. One day, I accidentally took my friend's purse home after a school event and found a phone card inside. These cards let you make calls from any phone but charge the bill to someone else's account. I know, not my proudest moment, but I used the card to keep talking to James for months. I talked to James for several months using that phone card. We had some really deep and personal conversations at all hours, sharing stories and jokes. We flirted for hours on the phone every night. We even got a bit playful role-playing characters and sending each other silly, grainy pictures. I made sure to keep my identity a secret, since he still thought I was one of my sister's friends. We really got into the fun of it. We had some really deep, long conversations, sometimes way past midnight. We shared stories, laughed, and just connected in a way that felt special. I was careful about what I shared, especially since he thought I was someone else. Eventually, my friend's family noticed a huge phone bill like thousands of dollars. They were understandably upset and took action. I had to make things right, paying back what I owed over a long time through my after-school job. Looking back, it was a crazy, reckless time, but also a time of first love, connection, and learning my way through life's messier moments. Would I do it again? Probably not, but it sure makes for a memorable story. Story 13. In college, it was a random weeknight when I started talking again to my first girlfriend. We had dated back in middle school and freshman year of high school, several years earlier. She was on a trimester schedule or something, so she didn't have classes that week and was at her parents' lake house alone. It was a classic "my parents are gone" text, and 5 minutes later, my mind was made up and I was on my way to the car. I drove 2.5 hours one way in the middle of the night in February upper Midwest to meet up with this girl and seal the deal that preteen me had set in motion about 7 years earlier. What my pent-up hormones forgot was that I had a mandatory chemistry lab at 8 a.m. the next day. Around 3 a.m. when the post-nut clarity hit while we were smoking some post-action weed, I realized the consequences. I ended up pulling an all-nighter. We hooked up again. Then I drove back to school. Running on zero sleep, about 6 times the healthy limit of caffeine and still groggy from her weak weed, I rolled into the chemistry building. I sat there for 10 minutes before realizing no one else was there. This was pre-smartphone days, and most people didn't carry laptops to class, so I hopped on a computer to check the schedule and saw an email from the professor saying the lab had been moved to the following week. She'd sent it just 2 minutes after I followed my second brain out the door the night before. Story 14. A while back, I had a one-night stand with a guy who, in hindsight, was deeply self-conscious about his size, and not in a subtle, insecure kind of way. From the second things started getting intimate, he couldn't stop talking about it, like constantly. It became this weird running commentary. He kept saying stuff like, "It's not always like this, and it gets bigger the more I use it, like it just needs to warm up and reach its true form." Honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't there for deep conversation or anatomical dissertations. He had a working, consenting adult body, and that was pretty much all I needed at the time. But then, as if trying to shift the spotlight off himself, he turned it around, and not in a flattering way. He started making these offhanded remarks about me, saying things like, "You're really wide," or "This is a real challenge, but I like that kind of thing." He kept trying to frame it like a compliment, but it came off more like I was some kind of personal Everest he was determined to climb for bragging rights. At that point, I was lying there thinking, how did this go from a casual hookup to a low-budget therapy session wrapped in weird passive-aggressive commentary? I honestly wish I'd snapped my legs shut and called it a night right then and there. But I was too driven by my hormones, and maybe a bit too polite for my own good. Looking back, it's one of those situations that perfectly illustrates why self-awareness and confidence, or at least basic social tact, go such a long way. All I wanted was a no-strings night of fun. Instead, I got a guy treating me like a mirror for his ego, and not even a clean one. Lesson learned. If a hookup turns into someone giving a TED Talk about their insecurities in the middle of foreplay, it's okay to call it early and go get a burrito instead. Burritos don't judge. Burritos don't give you weird metaphors about growing into their true size. Burritos just deliver. Story 15. When I was about 20, I went to the doctor's with my then-girlfriend. The doctor said he needed a urine sample, so I headed to the loo to try and pee. After 10 minutes of struggling, I still couldn't go. Knowing that I usually pee right after finishing, I decided to do the usual to relax and get things moving. It worked, and I finally managed to pee into the test tube. I went back into the consultation room, where the doctor and my mom were waiting. The doctor held the test tube up to the light and said, "I asked for a urine sample, not a semen sample." To this day, nearly 30 years later, I still cringe at the memory. Story 16. So I matched with this girl on Tinder. We were vibing pretty well, and since I was coming out of a dry spell and hoping to find something real, we arranged to meet up. She suggested her place, which was in a nice part of town, and mentioned she had a hot tub. Told me to bring my swim shorts. Sounded like a chill night, so I was in. When I got there, I realized I already knew her dad. We were both in the same choir group. Slightly awkward, but I tried to play it cool. Then she mentioned a couple of her friends would be joining us. Not what I expected, but I figured I'd stay open-minded. It was around mid-March, a little cold for hot tubbing, but still manageable. Things turned into a casual hangout, music playing, drinks flowing, and we were all just relaxing. It was more of a small party vibe than a one-on-one meetup, but it wasn't bad. Eventually, it got chilly, and we went inside. Her friends were fun, but they said they had to head out. While everyone was getting dressed, I said I should probably head home too. I had plans early the next morning. That didn't go over well. She got upset and tried to convince me to stay. I gently declined, but then, out of nowhere, she slapped me across the face. Hard. It knocked my glasses off, and even her friends were shocked. She laughed afterward, kind of nervously, and it was clear things were getting emotionally intense. As I tried to gather my stuff and leave, she broke down crying, full-on sobbing. I stayed to make sure she was okay. She eventually shared that she had a strong fear of the wind, and being outside earlier had really shaken her up. The night took a very unexpected turn, and I found myself trying to comfort someone who had just completely blindsided me, emotionally and physically. I eventually agreed to give her a ride. Don't ask me how. I think I was just too tired to argue. She ended up coming back to my place, but instead of going to sleep, she wanted to stay up, play music, and keep hanging out. I was drained, and when things started getting more personal, I decided to set a clear boundary. I said no, and stuck to it. Eventually, we both fell asleep, probably around 4 a.m., and the next morning, I had to host my friends for breakfast and a D&D session, and she stayed through the entire 4-hour game. After that, I took her home, and we gradually stopped talking. Story 17. I must have been in my early teens, maybe even a little younger. Back then, those late-night phone chat lines were all over TV on channels like BET and VH1. My dad worked 2 jobs, one during the day and one overnight, so I had a lot of alone time. Naturally, curiosity got the best of me, and I started calling those lines. I honestly don't even remember the conversations. I just remember that I spent a lot of time on them, way too much time, as I'd come to find out. One day, the phone bill arrived, and it was bad. Like, really bad. My dad was furious. There was yelling, lecturing, the whole 9. The timing couldn't have been worse, because a gift he'd ordered for me, a brand new pair of bowling shoes, had just arrived that same day. So now we're in the car heading to the bowling alley to pick them up, and the tension was thick. I was sitting there trying to be invisible. After we picked up the shoes and got back in the car, I forgot to say thank you. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just mentally shut down at that point. That triggered another outburst. He snapped, yelled something I won't repeat, and in a moment of rage, struck me. It was the hardest I've ever been hit. My head hit the car window, and for the next 3 days, one of my eyes wasn't quite working right. It would drift off to the side when I blinked. I was terrified it was permanent, but I didn't dare tell him. Now looking back, I understand that what happened was abuse. At the time, I didn't have the language for it. I just thought I'd messed up and deserved it. There were probably a dozen points in my early life where my parents could have seen I was struggling to understand myself, maybe even my own identity, and helped me, but they didn't. Now I'm in therapy, working through it, and oddly enough, I still have those bowling shoes. Story 18. I have a lot of wild stories, but here are 3 that really stick out. So one night, I was leaving a nightclub, and for some reason, maybe the music, the drinks, the energy, I was just feeling super bold. I called an Uber, and honestly, I was in that mood where you're flirty, reckless, and not really thinking things through. I was flirting with him, and he was flirting back. We started chatting during the ride, and the vibe was strong. One thing led to another, and we ended up spending way too long in a parking lot. You get the idea? The next day, I asked for his Snapchat, and I saw a post that made my stomach drop. It looked like he was with his wife and kids. I had no idea he was married. No ring, no mention of a family, nothing. I blocked him immediately and still cringed thinking about it. My next story is a bit complicated. I ended up getting really close with one of my best friends, someone who always identified as straight. But over time, our connection grew into something more. We started exploring that side of things, and it happened a lot. Eventually, I developed strong feelings for her, and things got really messy. She even stayed with me for a few months, rent-free, while we tried to figure out whatever it was we had going on, but we eventually decided to break it off. Looking back, I should have asked her to pay the rent for staying. Story 19. A while back, I was working at a warehouse job and ended up sleeping with a guy I worked with. It wasn't casual for me. It was a choice I made over months of building trust and getting to know him. He made me feel safe, comfortable, and seen, at least at the time. But after it happened, just once, everything changed. He told people, and then more people. Suddenly, I was being treated like I was some kind of open invitation. Guys would make inappropriate jokes right in front of me, whistle instead of calling my name, or accidentally brush up against me. If I spoke to a male coworker about anything work-related, there'd be a group of guys off to the side, nudging each other and laughing. It got so uncomfortable and humiliating that I eventually quit. The worst part? I started to carry that shame with me. Even now, more than a year later, I haven't been able to be physically intimate with anyone. Not because I'm not interested, but because something inside me still feels like if I let someone in, I'll just become a story again. A punchline, a brag. It's hard to explain how much it messes with your head being treated like you're less than human just because you made a personal choice that someone else turned into gossip. But I'm working through it. I know I'm not alone in this. I'm not what those people made me out to be, and neither is anyone else who's gone through something like this. Story 20. Back in 2008, I was at a bar, just hanging out and waiting for some friends to arrive. I was sitting near the fireplace, smoking a cigarette, when an older woman sat across from me. She had long curly hair, was wearing this big fuzzy vest, and gave off this very confident energy. She smiled, winked, and motioned me over. I looked around, thinking she might be talking to someone else, but she nodded at me directly. I walked over, a little confused but curious. That's when she leaned in and said something very forward. Let's just say she made her intentions extremely clear and then handed me her car keys, saying she was too tipsy to drive. I was 24 at the time, and the whole thing felt surreal. I tried to help her to the car. She kept stumbling and pulling on my arm, but eventually we got in, and I drove. She kept making odd comments and giving me strange looks, and I realized pretty quickly that this was not going to be a normal night. At one point, she dropped a line that made my stomach drop. "I want this before my husband gets home." I was frozen. Husband? She never mentioned a husband. And then I noticed framed photos all over her house, her and a man who looked like he played linebacker for a living. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I excused myself, saying I needed to step outside for a smoke, and then I booked it. I tried calling my friend to come get me, but this was back before GPS was easy to use. We had to literally navigate by the moon. I told him which freeway exit to take, and to keep the moon behind him, go through 2 lights, and I'd be at the condos on the right. And somehow, miraculously, it worked. He picked me up. We drove an hour back in total silence. Now, we laugh about it all the time. But the moral of the story: bars can take you on some very unexpected adventures, and not all of them are sexy or fun. Some are just bizarre. Story 21. A few years ago, I crossed a line with someone very important to me, my best friend. We had always had a close connection, but one night that connection turned into something more, and we kissed and ended up sleeping together. To this day, it was the most emotionally intense experience I've had with someone. But there was a catch. He was also talking to someone else at the time. I was in love with him, and for me, it wasn't just physical. It meant everything. Afterward, everything changed. Our friendship fell apart, and I lost not just the guy I loved, but my closest friend. I felt ashamed, confused, and deeply hurt. That experience affected me more than I expected. For a long time, I couldn't be intimate with anyone. The idea of sex gave me anxiety. I didn't feel safe, emotionally or physically. Eventually, I met my current partner. We've been together for 3 years now, and he's been incredibly patient and supportive as I worked through everything and started to feel like myself again. But not long ago, that old best friend messaged me. He said he missed me, that he couldn't stop thinking about what happened between us, and that he wanted to see me. I didn't respond. I blocked him. Not because I'm angry, but because I've changed. That part of my life was full of pain and confusion, and revisiting it would have been unfair to my partner who stood by me and helped me grow. The truth is, I'm not the same person I was back then, and I'm proud of that. Story 22. A while back when I was 23, I went home with someone I met at a bar. She was around 28, super outgoing, and we clicked pretty quickly. On the way back to her place, we stopped at another bar, and things started getting weird. She nearly got into a fight with someone for no clear reason. Honestly, that should have been my cue to leave, but I hadn't been with anyone in a long time, and I ignored my gut. When we finally got to her apartment, things got a bit more personal. But out of nowhere, she started tearing up mid-conversation, which caught me totally off guard. I just met her. Then, as we were talking about relationships and preferences, she said something that immediately made me realize I was in way over my head. She looked me in the eyes and said, "The hottest thing in the world to me is when a guy gives me a baby. I love the idea of holding his child for 9 months." I kind of froze. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a fun night out anymore. This was a situation I needed to leave. When she went to the bathroom, I quietly left. I ended up leaving a couple of things at her place, but to her credit, she actually returned them later. Looking back, I don't think she was a bad person. I think she was dealing with things emotionally and didn't have the healthiest outlet. But I also had to protect myself, and I was genuinely nervous about where things were heading. Some people might say I should have handled it differently, but I don't regret leaving. If something doesn't feel right, you have to listen to that voice in your head. It can literally save you. Story 23. I had one of the strangest Tinder experiences of my life a few years back. I matched with this girl, we were chatting, and she invited me over to her place. I showed up around 2 a.m. and knocked on her door. No answer. I texted her, and she told me to come in, said she was ready. So I walk in, and it's pitch black. Not dim, not moody, just full darkness. I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I'm already weirded out, but I call her, and she literally guides me to her room over the phone. It felt like I was in a horror movie. When I finally reach her room, the vibe flips, low lighting, music playing, and she's already under the sheets. No talking, just motions me over. So I go along with it. Everything's moving fast, and that's when I notice she sounds really sick. She keeps losing her voice and pausing to cough. She's still asking me to kiss her, but I'm hesitant. She can barely speak. It's kind of alarming. Then, and I swear this happened, mid-cuff, she reaches over to turn up the music, and what starts playing? A Christian praise and worship song. I'm not kidding. Full-on gospel ballad. And that was the moment I mentally left the building. I told her I needed to go, made up an excuse, and got out of there. 3 days later, I got hit with bronchitis. I should have listened to every single red flag. Lesson learned. Story 24. Being friends with benefits cost me my best friend. After my girlfriend and I broke up, I was pretty devastated. Around the same time, my best friend had also ended things with her fiancé. We found comfort in each other and started a friends with benefits relationship. At first, it felt good. We were close and connected. But, as often happens, we wanted different things. She hoped for something more romantic, but I wasn't ready to jump back into love or say I love you again. She tried to make me jealous by mentioning a guy in her class who liked her, but I didn't bite. Then she started dating someone else, and shortly after, she ended our physical relationship. We stayed friends for a bit, but around Christmas she told me we shouldn't have any contact anymore. I wanted to stay in touch, even just online, but she didn't want that. I lost my best friend. It's not a funny or sexy story, but it's real. Sometimes relationships change, and not always in ways we want. Story 25. I have a story about a friendship that almost got ruined, but somehow survived. My friend was really upset because she found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. I joked kind of recklessly that maybe she should get even. I didn't expect what happened next. She actually invited me over, and that night we crossed a line. Things got physical, and we ended up spending the night together. I got a bit carried away and stayed until early the next morning. Later that night, I called her, still feeling attached and hoping to reconnect. But she was upset. It hurt her that I had treated it like something casual. That moment seriously strained our friendship. But the good news? We're friends again now. We both agree it was a mistake, a weak moment that shouldn't have happened, especially since she was still in the relationship at the time. She ended things with him not long after, and now we can actually laugh about it. We're older, wiser, and grateful we didn't lose each other over one impulsive night. Story 26. So my wife and I had to see a doctor about trying for a baby. On her end, there were quite a few tests and procedures, but for me, they just needed to check my sperm count. We're sitting in the doctor's office, and they hand me a cup with instructions to fill out a form and, well, provide a sample. Simple enough. The one catch? No, activity for at least 48 hours beforehand to ensure an accurate result. My wife confidently told the nurse, "That's fine. We haven't done it in a week, so he's good to go." I just laughed and turned red. She looked at me like, "Wait, what?" Then went, "Oh, yeah, I had taken care of business the day before, so we had to wait another day." When it was finally time, I got the sample and was told to drop it off at a nearby clinic. I went in, handed it to the front desk, and they asked what it was. I said, "I was told to drop off my sample here." The woman looked confused and said, "This is the blood lab." I was at the wrong place.
The sperm testing clinic was literally one building over. A bit embarrassing, sure, but I've heard from others it happens more than you'd think. Story 27. A few years ago, after a long-term relationship ended, I was left emotionally drained. I tried coping in different ways, going on dates, staying busy. But eventually, I found myself slipping into isolation, especially with the COVID lockdowns in full effect. To regain some control, I took on a personal challenge, something I'd done before and found helpful, cutting off certain habits to focus on my mental clarity. But over time, with long work hours, no social life, and no real outlet, the loneliness crept in hard. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was emotionally vulnerable and honestly desperate for connection. About 2 months into this challenge, I downloaded a dating app called Pure just to feel something again. That's where I met someone who claimed to be an older woman looking for companionship from a younger man. She seemed kind and generous, even said she'd send me money up front to book a hotel room for us to meet. She sent what looked like a legit e-transfer, with my name, date, and amount. It looked real enough. I booked the room and started prepping for the meetup. Then she messaged again saying she needed me to buy Google Play gift cards to help her with some work issue and couldn't leave until it was sorted. She reassured me, "You got the money I sent, right? It'll cover it." Looking back, all the red flags were there, but I ignored them. I was in too deep emotionally. I went ahead and bought $400 worth of gift cards, scratched them, and sent her the codes. Then she claimed one of the codes didn't work and asked me to buy more. So I did. Another $300. The cashier even warned me, "There's a scam going around with these cards." I brushed it off. I didn't want to believe it. I finally got checked into the hotel. I even upgraded the room. It cost me nearly $300. I waited and waited. Her responses started slowing down. Then eventually, nothing. That's when it hit me hard. I had been scammed. The emotional crash was overwhelming. I ended up sitting in that hotel room alone, trying to process everything. I'd just been manipulated, lied to, and made decisions I never would have if I'd been in a better place mentally. The next morning, I went to the bank to report it. I had to stand in a long line, masks on, construction noise overhead, trying to explain what happened. It was humiliating. Eventually, they let me write down the full story, and it was passed on to their fraud department. A few months later, they confirmed I hadn't done anything wrong and advised me to report it to the police cybercrime unit. But by then, I just wanted to move on and forget it ever happened. I felt a deep shame, not just about losing the money, but about why I fell for it. I realized how dangerous emotional vulnerability can be, especially when combined with isolation and desperation. Luckily, I had a good roommate who supported me, and even joked about it to help lighten the mood. Story 28. So this happened during a summer where I was trying to see if I could casually connect with someone. We were feeling out whether there was potential for a friends with benefits situation. We both had hectic schedules, and the only time we were both free was after my 9:30 p.m. basketball game. It was a co-ed rec league, and in the final few minutes of the game, I went for a rebound and landed awkwardly after colliding with someone. I heard that pop, the one you never want to hear. I knew immediately I had seriously messed up my knee. Despite that, I was running on pure adrenaline and maybe a bit of denial, and I still made my way to the guy's place. I warned him I got injured and that I wasn't at 100%, so things might be a little limited. Turns out, there was no need to worry about limitations. The whole experience lasted maybe 90 seconds. He seemed checked out from the start, and right after, he said he was tired and going to bed soon. He asked me to head out. I was hurt. Physically, emotionally, everything. I called a friend of mine who thankfully lived nearby and was still awake. She buzzed me in and I limped over, feeling defeated, humiliated, and in actual pain. Never heard from the guy again. Honestly, 0 out of 10 experience, would not recommend. Story 29. I once met this stunning woman on the subway. Brunette, maybe redhead depending on the lighting, and she was actually looking at me first, which never happens. So I made a move. We chatted for a few stops, clicked way better than I expected, and ended up getting off at the same station. One thing led to another, and we decided to keep hanging out. Ended up splitting a hotel room nearby. I was kind of stunned how spontaneous the whole thing was. It felt like one of those surreal movie moments. Now here's where it takes a turn. She surprised me by pulling out handcuffs. I didn't expect that at all, but I figured, okay, she's bold, maybe a little adventurous. Let's see where this goes. So I go along with it. Next thing I know, I'm locked down, just in my boxers, heart pounding, but more out of curiosity than anything else. She goes to the bathroom. I'm just lying there, waiting for her to come back. And when she walks out, she's fully dressed. She gives me this look and says, "It was a pleasure doing business with you," and literally snatches the last $8 from my wallet before walking out. I laid there for hours. No phone, no pants, just the harsh lighting and the sound of my ego shattering. Eventually, someone from the hotel staff found me. Never saw her again. Story 30. So I used to work at a bank. I was single, fresh out of college, like 22 when I got sent to an executive conference out of state. It was a 2-week event, and the company booked us into a fancy hotel. On the second day, I was scrolling through Tinder in my room when I came across someone I recognized. We'd met briefly at the conference. She worked in the same department, but from a different region. A little older, very smart and confident. I joked with her the next day. "Hey, I saw you on Tinder." She laughed, and a few minutes later, ding, we matched. That night, we had dinner in the hotel lobby, just the two of us. Conversation flowed, and then she said, "Let's go up to your room." I didn't really think through the fact that we still had 2 full weeks left at this hotel, or that we'd continue working together after. What followed was, let's just say, a very eventful couple of weeks. But here's the twist. After the conference, we still had to work together for the next 3 years. And at our level, we shared something called dual control, meaning together we had the authority to approve large client transactions. So technically, what happened between us should have been disclosed and wasn't. For years, I was walking on eggshells, afraid someone would find out or that there'd be HR consequences. Also, I spent way too long worrying she might have gotten pregnant. I was 22, way too young to be playing with fire like that. In hindsight, she'd just been through a divorce and was probably on birth control. But still, it scared me. Moral of the story. If you're at a company event and things are going a little too smoothly, maybe pause and think it through. Story 31. When I was a teenager, I had to go in for a sleep study, where they attach a bunch of wires and sensors to your head and body and monitor how you sleep overnight. Now, I was already pretty nervous. You're being watched on camera, hooked up to machines, sleeping in a weird bed. It's not exactly relaxing. So before they started the monitoring, I went into the bathroom to, let's just say, calm my nerves. It was the only private space without cameras, so I figured, whatever, no harm done. The night went by, nothing unusual, or so I thought. The next day, we sit down to go over the results. It's me, my parents, and the sleep doctor, who, by the way, happened to be an attractive woman, which just made everything worse. They're going through the graphs and charts of my sleep patterns, and my mom points to a spike of activity right before I fell asleep. She asks, "Oh, what's that from?" At that moment, my entire soul left my body. I knew exactly what it was. The doctor looks at me, smiles, and very professionally says, "That's normal pre-sleep activity we often see in teens. The body finds its own way to relax." My parents just nodded like, "Oh, that makes sense." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there bright red, frozen, and praying for the floor to open up and swallow me. Then, on the way out, everyone's saying thank you and shaking hands. I awkwardly try to shake the doctor's hand too, and she just smiles and goes, "How about a pat on the back?" She actually patted me on the back. I'll never forget it. Story 32. I once dated someone who, in hindsight, was all red flags, but I ignored them at the time because the chemistry was intense. Big mistake. After we broke things off, she started showing up places uninvited, blowing up my phone, and trying to interfere with my work life. I was in the military at the time, with high-level clearance, so this was not just stressful, but potentially dangerous for my career. When I tried reporting it, I was surprised at how dismissive people were, like the idea of a woman stalking a man wasn't taken seriously.
but I stuck to my guns and made sure a report was filed. Later on, I learned that she came from a family with a lot of serious issues, including violent crime. That explained some of the chaos, but it didn't make it any easier. It took a long time to get her out of my life, and even longer to feel safe again. So when I hear people romanticizing clingy or possessive partners, I want to remind them there's a big difference between affection and obsession, and the line can turn dangerous fast. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.